evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another exciting virtual tour experience with the City of Tacoma and your host tonight, Pretty Gritty Tours. And this is a virtual tour of social justice throughout Tacoma's history, which is a wide and all-encompassing topic, one that can be sensitive for people, one that makes certain people angry, and we're going to do our best to navigate these waters because the history of social justice in Tacoma is intrinsic to the development of the city, both in a geographic and, I guess, historic sense. We wouldn't have the city that we have today by any stretch of the imagination without the dedicated actions of social justice advocates throughout the entire history of this city. And theirs is a story that doesn't always make the headlines, and these programs that have helped develop and enrich the city don't always get, billboard treatment. So we're going to go over a few of them tonight so that you can better understand all of this story here. And that's always the difficulty with any tour or historic treatment, is trying to wrap your head around the whole of the story, right? And I don't make any claims to do that. I do my best to present a balanced and comprehensive view of what has happened in the past, but it's difficult to get as many viewpoints as possible. So join me tonight as we experience this exciting virtual tour. Huge shout out to the City of Tacoma, for whom we have to thank this tour tonight. They are our benefactor, and they have been huge advocates in creating these virtual experiences throughout the year. This will be our final City of Tacoma virtual tour for this year, but rest assured, more coming up in 2021. So you guys feeling ready and excited? You can always put your comments down below, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube with us. I'll do my best to answer them, and we almost always have an assorted and dedicated cast of historians who show up for these things, who are happy to correct me when I'm wrong and to answer questions on a much deeper level than I sometimes have the capacity to do so. So here we go. Let's jump on in. So to really get anywhere in the story of Tacoma, and specifically with the story of social justice in Tacoma, we have to start by acknowledging the fact that we are on the ancestral Puyallup tribe lands. And to do that, there is really no better spokesperson or advocate than the Puyallup themselves. So I will let them take it from here.
It is the land right here that the Puyallup people have lived on since the beginning.
This
right here is where we are in the world, our homelands.
We work on our ancestral lands. We raise our children who go to school on the land of the Puyallup people. We acknowledge that the Medicine Creek Treaty was signed for the whites to take our land for their benefit.
Land was assigned to our people. The Caucasians said, "This is your land," and they took that land from us too.
Our land was stolen from us. Treaties were broken.
But we are still here today. Our people forage for food and materials, we pick berries, we canoe, we practice our traditional ways, and we speak Twelshutsi.
Just as our ancestors did.
We are finished.
So welcome to Pretty Gritty Tours. If at any point tonight on our tour of social justice throughout Tacoma, you feel uncomfortable, I want to welcome you into that feeling. We should feel uncomfortable tonight because the concept of social justice is that the deck is occasionally stacked, that not everyone gets the same hand, and that there needs to be a group that comes together and fights to make sure that people have equal access to rights and liberties and resources moving forward in life, and that we are all made better by doing so. And Tacoma, like so many other places throughout the world, has suffered through periods of this, and the periods of social justice have certainly made us stronger as a city and a population. And looking at the relationship that Tacoma has with the Puyallup Nation is a really good starting point for that. After Oregon and Washington State, territories at the time, separated their ways, there was a huge land grab for the coastal Salish areas that were occupied already, and it prompted a very bloody period of war, which then concluded with the Medicine Creek Treaties. These treaties, which we'll get into a little bit more, guaranteed certain things to the Puyallup Nation. And over a period of time, those were largely ignored. And this resulted in many periods of conflict, but one of the most visible was the fishing wars that happened here in the 60s and 70s. And to take a very complicated and incredibly delicate subject and do my best to condense it for you guys quickly, a lot of celebrities got involved in this. It got national headlines, and then eventually we end up with a judge, Bolt, coming down with the decision that the treaty is the law of the land as guaranteed in the Constitution, and that fishing rights needed to be guaranteed to the Puyallup. To give you guys a little more perspective on that, we've got some additional resources here for you guys. So the Smithsonian Institute actually has done a really incredible job of trying to make this a digestible story for people coming into it cold. And I'm borrowing their graphics tonight because I think they do a lot of really good stuff. But essentially, the decades-long fish war reached its prominence when people like Marlon Brando started getting involved in this. And I think the photographs that were coming out of this period here, one of the most famous, I think, is this one here of Allison Bridges, who in 1970 was arrested because the Puyallup were coming down to the river and occupying the area to be an act of civil disobedience, to perform resistance against being forcefully removed, because a lot of them were going down and exercising their treaty guaranteed fishing rights and then being forcefully removed by American authorities. As this was getting higher and higher prominence, you see more and more celebrities getting involved in it. And that's where this next photo comes from, with Robert Staticum and Marlon Brando here. And like I said, this was a judicial ruling that just reaffirmed the rights that the tribe had. So it might fall short of social justice in a couple ways, because it's not necessarily a story of people coming together to ensure that the rules were different or that the resources were more evenly distributed on a legislative zone, but certainly it's a story of social justice in that a underrepresented group had to fight for their rights in an environment that was better equipped to put them down for it. To give you a little bit more backstory on that, we actually have a clip here from the Smithsonian Institute with a few people who are more qualified than I am to speak on the subject.
So many times they'd been told they had no rights. So many times they were run off. Billy Frank, 51 times arrested and sent to jail. For what? For fishing under a treaty that is the supreme law of the land. Pretty odd.
The fish wars were really about asserting the tribe's rights under their treaties to take fish, not only on their reservations, but also at all usual and accustomed fishing places.
My people have a right to life. My people have a right to live. And this was just about our right to harvest, our treaty guaranteed right to harvest that our ancestors insisted on because they know you can't support your family if you don't have a means.
And yet, I think we have to blame some of the problems that tribes face on racism. I think we have to be honest about that. It is racism because we don't want another group to have something we don't have. Elizabeth Furs.
John Platt.
Ramona Bennett.
So I think that does a pretty good job of shading in some of the story. Obviously, it's much more expansive than all of that. But I think on the topic of social justice, it's a really good indicator because it is a representation of needing to come together to fight for this change to make society better. And as far as the decision on the treaty that Bolt ruled on, it's very cut and dried. And I actually have a really good clip on this. Bear in mind, this was designed for an educational group, but I still found it very interesting, and I think you will too.
Okay, what do we know about treaties?
Unfortunately, most people in this country have no knowledge of the Constitution and of the fact that treaties are in Article 6 of the United States Constitution.
And all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land.
From the early 1900s to the 1970s, there were many clashes, sometimes violent, between the Indians, sport fishermen, and others about who could fish, where, and when.
So the states of Washington and Oregon passed laws that limited an Indian's right to fish for salmon.
Sir, Indian nations kept their right to fish in treaties.
And the Washington and Oregon laws violated the Indian nations' treaties because...
And all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land.
And what Judge Bolt did and what the Supreme Court did was not give rights in those cases. They affirmed them. In other words, they said, these rights are there. We recognize them. That's a very different thing from being given a right. The tribes knew they had the rights.
There's a real tradition in the Pacific Northwest of tribal people going to the courts as being that the courts were the only real remedy that they were going to find. And they did find it over and over and over.
Elizabeth Furs.
John Platt.
So again, just to bring the whole thing full circle, we see a reaffirmation of rights that were already there and that a group had to come together and bring in some celebrity power to get the national attention to bring it where it needed to go. And this is the beginning of a major movement of social justice in the area. And again, it was a treaty, which is the supreme law of the land. The ripple effect that has come afterwards from the fish wars has been truly momentous, and we've seen a lot of good come out of it. And very recently, the dedication of the former Puyallup Bridge right here. This is the, it's the new bridge in the area here that they built to it, and it has a variety of names to it, but I think the Fishing Wars Memorial Bridge is the most commonly used one here. And this goes right over the Puyallup River, and it was the area that was occupied by the camps as the Puyallup tribe and nation were fighting for their rights to have this treaty acknowledged. So now we're in it. If you have questions on this, I know that we've got Lauren Hugamer on tonight as well, who is an excellent resource for answering some more of these questions. And of course, you can find a lot of this information on the Puyallup Tribe's website itself. And you can see this fight for acknowledgement and social justice continuing today with the tribe's very adverse reaction to the proposed LNG plant that's being proposed in the area there. You can do additional research on that. I'm not going to get too much into it tonight, but I think it's an important cap on the fact that this is an ongoing struggle. It's not something that was simply resolved in the area, but it is a dynamic and fluid relationship between not just the state of Washington, but the city of Tacoma and the independent Puyallup Nation, our neighbor to the right next door. So let's bring it back a little. I think it's fitting that having yesterday be Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, that we should talk a little bit about some of the effects that came out of that we're not as proud of. One of them is, of course, the Japanese internment, and a large population of first-generation Japanese Americans living here in the Puyallup, Fife, and Tacoma area were moved to the Puyallup State Fairgrounds, that area there, which at the time was called Camp Harmony, before they were relocated to permanent internment camps. And these photos here are from the archives and exhibits over at the Fife History Museum. And they're items that were made by these Americans who were interned at these camps during essentially the entire period of World War II. And it tells a really good story of that. One of my favorite stories from that area is of the seniors. There was a graduating class who born and raised here in America, but their parents were Japanese who immigrated here. And when they were sent to internment camps, they missed their graduating ceremony. And so they got together and they purchased this American flag that's on the left here and gave it to their classmates in a ceremony to be like, hey, everything's going to be okay. We'll be back soon. And to hear them tell their story is really incredible, because each of them were like, yeah, it was for the war effort. We were, of course, going to go and make sure that everything was going all right for our country. And then the trickle effect of realizing what was happening over time is something that echoes for them to this day. The secondary flag is the flag that was presented to those Japanese Americans who were supposed to graduate but missed their ceremony when they were invited back to Fife High School for the opportunity to walk with the graduating class, I believe in 2004. And they presented them with an American flag to help bring that story full circle. On the topic of social justice, it's interesting because after these Americans were released from Japanese internment camps, from American internment camps, they were finding that they couldn't purchase land, that if they had homes or farms in the Puyallup or Fife Valley, they had been confiscated while they were gone, and they now had laws that prevented them from buying or owning land in the area. And actually, a lot of those people who made the decision to return back here to where they felt at home ended up either buying or leasing land from the Puyallup Nation. And I love that that is an example of social justice where an underrepresented group had an opportunity to help elevate another one here. So this blanket is also on display in the Fife Museum, was hand-stitched by a member of the Puyallup tribe, and tells the story of that relationship that they had with the Nisa as they returned from these internment camps. And I think we're going to end up doing an entire virtual tour on that experience, because in particular, the downtown section of Tacoma, where there used to be a really impressive Japantown, and then the Puyallup and Fife valleys, where there was a tremendous amount of first-generation Japanese living and working in the farming community, is a story that I'm excited to be able to tell. But on the topic of Tacoma's historic journey through social justice, it's a long and winding road, and we've got some key examples of it. One of the most easily recognizable, I think, is actually here. So this is Slovenian Hall, which is on what is now 30th, which would have been the main street through Old Town Tacoma. back in the 1860s. And this lodge was actually built in 1900 and was established as a way for Croatian immigrants coming to the area to have a leg up, recognizing that they wouldn't be able to just get off the boat, walk onto the shores of Tacoma and have equal opportunities. They needed an opportunity to learn the language, to help find work, to have people to help take care of them. And in fact, this would actually pay out like funeral costs for a lot of the people here, or look after widows as well, especially in like 1912, where Croatian fishermen were at a high risk position in the area. Now, Slovenian Hall still stands down in Old Town today and is a really good example of this social justice community that really was working to make sure that an underrepresented group, in this case, Croatian minorities, had an opportunity to compete effectively in the economic climate here. An equally good example of that is the Swiss Lodge. First of all, this is just a cool photo because it shows how the massive steam trains used to run right downtown Tacoma. So this, I think, is 21st Street looking westward up the hill there. And this is the old brewery district. It would be moving right into the University of Washington Tacoma campus right here. But that building in the back, sort of center right with the tower, is the Swiss Lodge. And it used to be, up until a couple months ago, the Swiss bar, restaurant, and music venue as well. But this was first constructed in 1902 for the same reason that the Slovenian Hall was. It was an opportunity and a safe haven for Swiss immigrants to arrive here on the shores of Tacoma, find someone who spoke their language, find someone who could teach them the language here, hook them up with job opportunities, help them navigate the legal and economic hurdles of arriving to a new country. Interestingly, a lot of these social justice facilities and communities were close partners. So this is actually a picture of the Filipino Americans Society from, I think this picture was from maybe 1956, sort of at the beginning of the Filipino American Society's founding here in the Tacoma and Seattle area. And the society needed a place to have their meetings, and the Swiss Lodge was like, well, we're also a bunch of minorities. We can help you out here. So this is the interior of the Swiss Lodge here as they were giving an opportunity for the Filipino Americans to have their meetings here. And giving each other the opportunity to succeed by helping one another out is key to the concept of social justice. And a perfect example of that on sort of a like broad stroke spectrum here in Tacoma is the Tacoma Community House. Now, Tacoma Community House can draw its origins all the way back to 1907. It's undergone some rebranding and some name changes over the years. It was first a collection of Methodists who were looking to provide opportunities for people in their congregation, and then has really blossomed out into a thriving network of being able to provide those same services that Slovenian Hall and the Swiss Lodge used to provide to all immigrants in the area. So this picture, I think, is from 1919, as they were getting their new facility. But the services that they provide have been wide-ranging. So this is actually a picture of kindergarten class. One of the things that the Tacoma Community House realized would be essential to allowing people to thrive here in the city was offering kindergarten classes, not just because it provided more opportunities for parents to go and be able to work, but because it really ensured that children, no matter their socioeconomic background, had the same access to just the basic education before entering the public school system. And so you could go and send your children to this kindergarten here at the Tacoma Community House and really help give them a boost going into what would just be the Wild West of education. Another one of the key services that you can see here, this is actually Dr. Maurice Moses of the Hilltop Multi-Services Center. He was a doctor with Tacoma Community House, though, and they provided, if not free, very affordable healthcare options for people who were a part of Tacoma Community House. And a huge part of that was having your infants examined by a doctor or given inoculations. And so just having an organization whose commitment to providing these resources and opportunities to people and having that in the area it's impossible to describe what a huge benefit that was. Because especially if you're a new immigrant to the area, or you don't speak the language, or you're not educated in the same way, or you're just trying to get into the workforce, having the ability to ensure that your children are medically safe, educated, finding a place where you can learn the language and a safe community, just impossibly good. Yeah, this is another great thing. So they also help apply and prepare people for their citizenship interviews. I'm trying to think, I got so many slides on them here because they do such incredible work. This is not their first, but their second facility. And in fact, I think we have the opportunity to hear a little bit from them about what they do.
Since 1910, Tacoma Community House has served Puget Sound's immigrant and refugee communities. Founded by Methodist women in Tacoma's Hilltop neighborhood, TCH continues its legacy of promoting social justice. As we prepare for our 110th anniversary in 2020, we are proud to continue to serve approximately 3,500 people annually in our new facility, which the community of Tacoma helped build.
So also, happy birthday, Tacoma Community House, 110 years old right now in 2020, and having access to all of these resources during a global pandemic, I know has been invaluable for a lot of people. So if you're looking for a prime and shining example of social justice in the area, Tacoma Community House is a wonderful one. They were also instrumental in seeing that Willie Stewart ended up becoming a teacher, giving him the opportunity to do so. If you're not familiar with Mr. Willie Stewart, it's this good-looking guy right here. And right after the Brown versus Board of Education decision and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Tacoma School District was taking the opportunity to voluntarily desegregate several of their schools here in the Tacoma area. And the first African-American teacher to be hired in the Tacoma School District was Willie Stewart here. And the Tacoma Community House was instrumental in making that a possibility. He actually ended up, I think in 1971, also becoming the first Black principal in the city of Tacoma as well. So as far as landmark achievements, he was a pioneer, and everything that I've ever read about him, he was also a phenomenal educator. I believe he was a science teacher when he first started, but had a broad spectrum of subjects that he taught. And just the stories that I've heard of him as an inspiration are actually dwarfed by the stories I've heard of him just being a phenomenal educator and really inspiring people to do better in their life, no matter what their background. As far as leaders and advocates from the Hilltop area who have been really monumental in the social justice movement in Tacoma, I would be remiss without at least mentioning Reverend Ernest S. Brazil. He came to the area and was a tremendous advocate for ensuring that people had a safe place to be and seeing that the anti-African American legislation and housing acts of the time were taken down or diminished. So creating safe and affordable places for people to live in the city of Tacoma based on their background was a huge thing that he undertook in his lifetime. And because of his peace missions and his social justice advocacy, what was 12th Street running through Hilltop area has been renamed to Ernest S. Bill Street. And Shiloh Baptist was the church where he was the reverend for basically his entire life after he moved to the area. Has been renamed in his honor as well. So this is the ES Brazil multi-purpose building at this point, still focusing on social justice in the area. Now, where would I be on a social justice tour without talking about former Mayor Harold Moss? Now, we just recently lost Harold Moss. He passed away, I believe, at the age of 90, just very recently. And he was the first African-American mayor for the city of Tacoma, and just a pillar of advocacy and justice and social justice throughout the city for a long period of time here, both in his time working on the city council and as mayor. But long before that, he very quickly, upon arriving here, he was part of the military. And after leaving Lewis McCord, I believe he was just in Lewis at the time, moving into the Tacoma area, into Hilltop, he was trying to buy a house, him and his wife. And he found that no one would sell him a house once they saw that he was Black. So this became a mission that was near and dear to his heart, was being able to find housing in these communities. So he was a huge proponent for the march on essentially Sears and Roebuck. And his slogan here, "Don't buy where you can't work," was this understanding that before you could remove the stigma of people being African-American in the community, you had to actually see them around. And so places that wouldn't hire Black employees became the subject of boycotts from the Black community here in Tacoma in the 1960s and 70s. And as they changed their ways and started hiring more people of African-American descent, they became part of the business community there, and they saw a tremendous amount of growth and strength and development based on that movement. After he became mayor, he used that only as a launch point to really develop more social justice measures throughout the city of Tacoma. And the list is impossibly long to go through all, but I think it's important to mention that he was a very prominent member of the Tacoma Urban League. And Tacoma Urban League plays a lot of the similar roles that Tacoma Community House does, but really focuses primarily on ensuring that there is an equal footing for people in this community who are African American. Whether it's giving resources so that you can help find and support locally owned Black businesses, whether it's helping to develop business skills for Black members of the Tacoma community, or providing social services and resources so that you can be safe, that you can find an education, so that you can become a part of the society and feel like you have a place here and feel safe here and wanted here. These have all been key measures of the Tacoma Urban League, and they have done a really phenomenal job developing those skills throughout the years. One of their major active members has actually been Tawana Nobles, which you may know. She was recently elected just last month to the state Senate with District 28. And she has been a huge member of the Tacoma education system. She has been a huge member of the Tacoma Urban League, and just as a member of social justice and advocacy in the city of Tacoma, really ensuring that people have access to education, that they have access to legal services, that children have an opportunity to be educated no matter their economic background, have been huge pushes for her. And one of the most topical things that she has done is that during the COVID pandemic that has ravaged the world, there suddenly became a really obvious disparagement between families that had and families that had not. And so a lot of kids that didn't have the same economic, resources didn't have access to computers or laptops or internet. And we're getting left in the dust now that everything became virtual online distance learning. And really spearheading the movement with the Tacoma Urban League, Taiwan really ensured that all of these children had access to computers and to internet to make sure that they weren't getting just forgotten by the education system here in Tacoma in a completely unknown and unknowable time in the world. If you're looking for more sort of information about what the Tacoma Urban League does or what they offer, I really encourage you to go to their website because they have a tremendous amount of programs. And one of my favorite things is they have an actively curated list of Black-owned businesses in the area. So I'm just going back here really quick to make sure that I'm answering all the questions here. And yes, someone asked, why was Slovenian Hall for Croatians? Because it was built by Croatians. The Croatian population at the time realized that they needed a place where they could take care of each other. So they got together to do that, which was really, when you get down to it, the baseline of social justice. It's groups coming together, addressing the fact that not everyone has the same access to resources or even to the justice system, and ensuring that they have a group that can provide advocacy and support and resources to ensure that they have a fair shot at the same life that we all dream about. And like I said early on, the story of the fishing wars is a great example of that, where you have a national treaty, a supreme law of the land, written by the national government, and it is just being blatantly ignored at every opportunity because there is a group that has power and opportunity and a group that doesn't. And the only way to change that is to come together, address the need, and provide opportunities and resources to see that it's changed. Social justice. One of my favorite groups that we've talked about in the past here is the L'Arche Center. The L'Arche Center provides all of those same things: legal representation, opportunities, safety, shelter, and community for people with intellectual disabilities or non-neurotypical members of Tacoma. And they have had to advocate throughout the years for the same sort of legal protections that a lot of other groups have had to fight for as well. One of the big examples of this was 1973. The Rehabilitation Act was signed into law, and the Rehabilitation Act in 73 essentially made it illegal to discriminate on housing based on someone's intellectual disability, whether or not they had one. This is just a very prime example of legislation needing to be changed because it was very much targeted against people just to keep communities homogenous, essentially. Again, in 1988, the Fair Housing Act was amended to allow for people who had intellectual disabilities or who were non-neurotypical to be allowed to purchase homes in the area. And a huge advocate and support for this was the L'Arche Center. If you're not familiar with them, they're sort of south of Tacoma now, in the South Tacoma area, where they have a farm where they do essentially farm shares, farmers markets, and a beautiful collection of dahlias raised in-house, and then provide a social setting, sometimes housing, and then just a community for people who have intellectual disabilities. And they are a huge champion of social justice in the area, also who found their home in Hilltop, which has actually been a reoccurring theme for us tonight here. This is on the right here, the founder of Tacoma L'Arche's area here. And this is the beginning of L'Arche because he was living here in the Tacoma area. He was going to St. Leo's, and every now and then these two gentlemen pictured here in the middle who had intellectual disabilities would show up at his front door, knock on the door, and just be like, "Hi, we're just saying hello." And they would wander around the neighborhood just knocking on people's doors and saying hi. And eventually he invited them in for dinner. So they had dinner together, and then the next day they showed up at exactly the same time and they had dinner together. And then eventually the decision was made that they could just all live together and that he would help provide an opportunity for them to have an equal and fair access to a good life. Thus began the L'Arche community in Tacoma, providing those opportunities for people not just who were living in the area, either with or without their families, but also for people who had been neglected or put aside into mental institutions with a poor understanding or desire to understand a lot of intellectual disabilities, especially in the 60s and 70s. People who could find a rich and rewarding life with proper care were just being sent to a mental institution for a one fix. Now, a lot of these people were coming back out and finding a community with the L'Arche Center or with other places in the area there. So today, the L'Arche community has, I believe, like 84 members. It's an ever fluctuating list. And the L'Arche system throughout the world is quite broad, but Tacoma has one of the prominent ones right here. Another really good example of social justice in the area is the Rainbow Center, located here in Tacoma. And they actually also have something that I'm going to share with you guys here so you can hear from their own words.
I think that the fear of offending somebody and the fear of failing around stuff that we don't know is actually the thing that causes people to not engage with topics, because they're afraid that they're going to mess up, and that messing up means something about who they are, as opposed to it just means that they just don't have the information yet. So I look at my job as like giving people the permission to fail, the permission to apologize, and the permission to actually learn and stay teachable.
Our management team was nervous about these trainings. The training that we got from Rainbow Center was just incredibly valuable. It was not, you must do this all the time and you can't ever mess up and it has to be perfect all the time. The training was, we're human, it is an adjustment, we understand, but it's about being respectful. It was so new to a lot of people that they needed that time to feel free to ask those questions and voice their concerns. And most of the employees, and I'm not gonna lie and say all of them, but most of them did come around and realize that Milgard is not trying to tell you what to think or believe, but we are setting very clear expectations that if you're gonna be part of our organization, this is what our organization values.
I've been at PLU for about 13 years, and one of the things that I'm grateful for is the relationship that PLU has really forged with the Rainbow Center. The Rainbow Center is one of the ways that we kind of check ourselves to see that we're doing the work that is so embedded in our mission statement of, in my words, humanizing folks, not just based on their sexual orientation and their gender identity, but also race, sex, and socioeconomic class and ability, all these intersectional pieces. The Rainbow Center plays a role and is a consultant and is a partner in helping us do that work and achieve those goals that are so closely linked to our mission.
So in 2016, we started embarking on our journey to providing more culturally sensitive and responsive care for LGBTQ patients and family members. In June of 2016, we held our first ever Multicare Pride event. We invited several people from the community to be part of a panel, which included the Rainbow Center, Pierce County AIDS Foundation, and a variety of other staff and leaders who identified as LGBTQ. And the whole purpose was to bring our staff and leaders together to learn more about how we can better serve our LGBTQ patients and provide care that's sensitive and attentive to their needs.
There are a lot of organizations providing opportunities to level the playing field and to ensure that we all have an opportunity to succeed here. One of them is Kwabi with the Peace Bus. If you're not familiar, we've had him on the program before. He is a tremendous guy. And Kwabi just wanted to promote this idea that peace was possible. So he got a bus, he painted it blue, rode the peace bus on the side, and goes around on these quests, these expeditions to ensure that people have an understanding of peace and what it can do in the community on a tangible sense. One of the things that he's been working on this year is that, again, with the pandemic, there were a lot of kids who relied on the school system to have food. And so he loaded up the peace bus with breakfast and went around to these communities that needed the support and provided breakfasts for these kids that were missing out. And that, for me, that's it right there. You know, none of us is an island. None of us can do this thing called life on our own. And that's the first step. And I love what she says at the beginning of the Rainbow Center video there, that it's not about feeling awkward about anything. It's about starting the conversation and realizing that none of this is an attack, but an opportunity for us all to become better and stronger. And I think that at its heart, very specifically in Tacoma, is what social justice is about. It's about taking this opportunity to acknowledge that we'll all be stronger together, to look at the needs of other communities and to hear them out on that, to hear what it is that people feel that they are lacking, to acknowledge that and to work towards filling those needs. And we can only do that together. So if you guys need an additional list of resources, we'll have them up on Pretty Gritty Tours. And if you're looking for ways to give back to this community, all of the organizations that we've talked about tonight, I'm huge fans of as far as social justice in the Tacoma area. If you guys have questions for me, please let me know. I'm always happy to address them. If you've enjoyed yourselves tonight and this tour, you can always feel free to tip your guide, completely unnecessary, because the City of Tacoma's Historic Preservation Office has taken care of it. But on the homepage of prettygrittytours.com, you can. And with that, we have arrived at the end of our roster for 2020. This is our final city tour for the year. Don't worry, there are more virtual tours coming up, hopefully both with the City of Tacoma, but certainly with just us Pretty Gritty Tours moving forward. So if you guys have questions about the City of Tacoma, the greater South Sound area, or life in general, please share them with us, because we like to be a part of that conversation. And I would love to see what's going on in everyone's mind. Thank you all for joining me on this journey tonight. It is a topic that is deep and dear to my heart, and I'm glad that we got to have the chance to talk about it. So with that, I very sincerely urge you all to keep on exploring. I'm Chris Staudinger, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.